DawgNation, and welcome to DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with, I suppose it's Chef Connor Riley today?
Yes, Chef. We're in the kitchen today, having some fun. Excited to talk some Georgia football today, and obviously work on some key recipes, and really just keep the people happy and serve them what they deserve.
So, Connor, last week there was a breaking news within DawgNation. And maybe not the breaking news that you're thinking of, but Kelly Stafford goes on record to say that she may have done some stuff with the backup to make Matt Stafford jealous, but we're here to confirm the truth. We have inside sources that tell us there was another person at UGA at the time they were in school with Kelly Stafford who she really wanted but wasn't able to get. It's our very own Cody Chaffins. I mean, look at that face. Can you blame Kelly?
Hey, look, Cody is a wonderful chef in his own right. I'm sure he had a lot of fun on Clayton Street in that time, but he's a happily married man now. No sense in digging up old tea here.
While it is true, I was in Athens at the same time, and then covering the team around the same time that Kelly and Matthew were just sparking their flame. I was sparking my own flame at that time. Actually, my wife now, she and I were together at that time. So I'm not going to spill any more tea there. I'm not going to add to this. If I've learned anything from Kelly Stafford, keep your mouth shut.
Hey, we support women's rights and women's wrongs, but we will forever and always be Team Cody on DawgNation at Large. And with that, we'll get on with the rest of our show. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Connor Riley and Cody Chaffins, and this is DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
All right, DawgNation, welcome back to DawgNation at Large, the newest show that DawgNation has to offer. And if you can't tell by what Connor's wearing or what just went down in our open, this is a show where you never really know what's going to happen. And I think that what we just saw in the first minute and a half of the show goes to show what our show is all about. And with that, let's go ahead and get to today's rundown, and we'll tell you guys what we're going to be doing today on DawgNation at Large. Starting with UGA has been on a massive hot streak. So much has happened. We know it can be a little bit confusing, so we're going to break it all down for you. And then next, EA Sports releases the top 10 toughest places to play, the top 10 offenses, and the top 10 defenses. We're going to see where the Dogs fell amongst those lists, and did they get it right? And lastly, we're going to do our first ever Mount Rushmore on the show, and it's going to be the Mount Rushmore of our names being Kaylee, Cody, and Connor, and then we're going to have another special guest for our Mount Rushmore, but that's what we've got in store for you today. And first, we're going to start off with UGA's recruiting hot streak. Connor, it feels like we were stagnant for a while in the 2025 class. We just kept waiting for something to happen, and then boom, one thing happens, and it's been a domino effect ever since.
Yeah, really, since the month turned to June, Georgia has really turned up the heat on its recruiting rankings and recruiting commitments, rather. You start the month with guys like Christian Garrett joining the fold, and then this past week you get your biggest commitment yet in five-star edge Isaiah Gibson. A lot of fireworks there involved with that recruitment. Obviously, him being a one-time USC commit, backing off and flipping. He's not the only former USC commit Georgia's hoping to land there. It'd be Justus Terry, a five-star defensive lineman from Manchester, Georgia, there as well. It's been a very successful June for Georgia already on the recruiting trail, and I think July has a chance to be even more bountiful of a harvest in terms of some of the guys that they land. But I think the most recent news is perhaps the biggest, and maybe just the most telling of what recruiting is like in this modern age. Kaylee, you were there on hand on Wednesday when CJ Wiley, I think, shocked just about everybody, not just in the room, but those watching along, when he announced that he wouldn't be going to Georgia, which is obviously the in-state school, or LSU, where both of his parents went. But he ends up picking Florida State, and then afterwards gives some comments there that I think are even more surprising based on what he had to say. So it just sort of it speaks to where recruiting is in this day and age, where June, usually one of the more dormant months for people who follow recruiting for a long time, is now the spiciest month of the recruiting calendar.
Yeah, we'll get to more on CJ Wiley and the University of Florida State University later. We're going to circle back to that. But I want to start with what I viewed almost started this streak to begin with. And believe it or not, it happened on June 18th when 4-star edge Isaiah Gibson and 5-star defensive lineman Justus Terry decommitted from USC. And even though this wasn't necessarily Georgia related, I almost felt like this was the catalyst that sparked the craziness that this last week has been, because I think when we saw that happen, we assumed at that point that UGA would potentially at least get one of the two, maybe not both, but I think everybody in their right mind thought that they would get one of the two, and they do. But it made me think of the mascot meme that we used from last week. Like, I would like to see Kirby and Lincoln Riley in those two places.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of skepticism around Isaiah Gibson and Justus Terry when they first committed to USC, just because of the distance. And they seemed like such, safe Georgia bets at the time. Terry was, in fact, a Georgia commit. And then this week, Gibson goes ahead, pulls the trigger, had canceled a visit to Oklahoma, visits Georgia again this past weekend, and is now a member of this class and someone who, we talked on Monday about this. Someone Georgia needs in this class. The best version of this Georgia class has both Isaiah Gibson and Justus Terry in it. Terry has taken multiple visits to Georgia already over the course of his recruitment, did take a visit to Alabama recently. But I know, Kaylee, you were sort of just hedging the bet there a little bit, saying, maybe Georgia gets one. Georgia absolutely needs both of these guys in the class, along with Elijah Griffin out of Savannah. I know we're not talking about him because of obviously the South Georgia ties there, but I think Georgia's best recruiting class involves Isaiah Gibson, Justus Terry, and Elijah Griffin all in this class together. They got Gibson this week. We'll see how much longer Terry pulls his recruitment out. And then obviously Griffin is expected to be around roughly December announcement. So these are all really important recruitments. And as you point out, Kaylee, them decommitting from USC, the second domino of sorts in this recruiting battle for these guys, with obviously them committing to USC back on March 24th. Being the first, but Georgia's got a long way to go to still win these battles. But I think as we sit here today at the end of June, you feel as good as possible about where things stand with both Gibson and Terry.
Yeah, I think if there's anything that we can take away from the decommitments of Isaiah Gibson and Justus Terry, it's, Connor, those tables, they always are going to turn. And it seems like it's been that way with USC and UGA for quite some time now. But we'll come back to Isaiah Gibson. For now, I want to go to what I viewed to be the next domino that fell, and that happened on June 24th when interior offensive lineman Dontrell Glover committed to the G. 6'3.5", 310 pounds from Langston Hughes High School. First off, I feel like he really fits this mold and type that we see within the offensive line and what Stacey Searles has tried to build that around. But what I think is really fascinating about the Dontrell Glover decision, it was made on June 24th, but he was initially scheduled to commit July 1st. So after his official visit, he said, I don't need any more time. I know what I want to do. I want to go to UGA. And I think in the midst of what recruiting has become, I think it's really refreshing to see a guy who knows exactly what he wants.
Yeah, and this is something I think we're seeing more and more of, not just with these June decisions and announcements. You think back to, say, like the 2022 recruiting class, where Georgia used to do a lot of its work around signing day. They'd make those big splashes and make that late push. That's not the way they do it anymore. And especially now with signing day even being moved up from late December to before the SEC championship game, I think more and more schools are going to want to have their recruitments locked up, even going into these July months when the dead period hits. I think we've just seen this is the new way of college recruiting, where you take your visits in May and June, and then by the end of June, maybe at some point in July, to give yourself some space and some clarity there, make that decision then. We saw last year a lot of guys commit during the month of July. Glover knows what he wanted to do. He's had a lengthy recruiting process already. It was a one-time Alabama committed under Nick Saban. And now Georgia has a second offensive lineman in this class that was a 1-point committed to Alabama, and now in this class playing for Stacey Searles. Look, Georgia's offensive line recruiting and development under Searles has largely been unimpeachable. You look at the way that he has developed so many of these players as this offensive line continues to churn out first-round draft picks and still continue to be one of the best offensive lines in the country on a year in, year out basis. Landing a guy like Glover is key when you have a talent like that in state, and they're able to beat out Florida State. They're able to beat out Alabama and land a guy that I think is going to be able to help them, and someone who will be playing in big college football playoff games one day. Better that he's doing it for you instead of, say, a Florida State or an Alabama who will likely be there as well.
I think that you hit the nail on the head in talking about in-state recruiting, especially from a guy like Dontrell Glover, who is at Langston Hughes, which is one of the top high school football programs in the state. They produce elite talent, and you know that he's going to be ready when he comes to Georgia. On Jeffson Tell Us Before the Hedges show last night, he actually told us that, and I've never heard of this happening before. I didn't play football, so maybe that could be why, but Dontrell Glover actually got in trouble by the refs for blocking too hard. I mean, if that's the case, this is exactly the kind of person that you want blocking for you on the offensive line.
So, Kaylee, you've never seen The Blind Side?
That's not, I mean, even though the story is based on a true story, that is a fictional account of it. I mean, like a firsthand witness account.
He took him to the buses. He had to go home. Dontrell Glover takes that seriously. As a former offensive lineman myself, I was flagged once for blocking a guy too hard, though it was maybe after the whistle had been blown.
Is there anybody that can confirm this?
Yeah, I was a 2-year starter in high school. I'm not here to rehash.
That's not what I asked you, Connor. I asked if there was anybody who could confirm that right now.
On this broadcast, no. That cannot be confirmed, but that is not an unheard of penalty. It's roughly like unnecessary roughness.
Seems like a cop out.
Again, as pointed out, it was seen in The Blind Side. So,
okay, well, that has nothing to do with the fact that this is exactly the kind of guy that we want on the UGA offensive line, blocking for our star quarterbacks in the future. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Isaiah Gibson. I'm actually going to compliment you here and say that I thought that you had a really great point about this on DawgNation Daily on Tuesday. But before we get to that, I want to bring up a clip back when Kirby Smart was talking about the KJ Bolden flip. We're going to play this, and then we're going to tell you how it all ties into Isaiah Gibson. Let's hear that now.
There was no different recruitment for KJ. It was just consistent and a mutual respect, probably is the right word. You know, I reached out to him when he committed elsewhere and just told him I had a lot of respect for him and we weren't going to stop recruiting him, and that he thought this was the best place for him. And I've always learned, Andrew Thomas's parents told me that consistency is the key, and we were very consistent every time he was here. And then, you know what, it worked out. It doesn't always work out, but it worked out in this case, and we're not going to change our method we go about things.
So the key word that sticks out here is consistency. Even though the decision had already been made by both Isaiah Gibson and KJ Bolden, UGA stayed consistent in the recruitment process of them, and ultimately it led them to Georgia. I think that was the point that you brought up, Connor, is that now, even when the decision is made, you can still go after them, and that consistency is key in those flips.
Right. The old adage used to be, okay, the recruitment starts when he publicly commits somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so I think with Georgia, look, they understand, and Kirby certainly does in this modern age of recruiting when it comes to NIL. Look, there are going to be guys that get shown a lot of money up front and decide to jump at that. That's just sort of the reality of what we're living in right now. And I think he understands that moving forward, you have to have the same pitch, whether a guy is committed to you or not, because these things can change. You know, you even look at the Jaden Rashada recruitment there and the money that is allegedly being thrown around in those recruitments. And so I think with Gibson here representing that to a T, look, he committed to USC. It came out of left field. Georgia was undeterred by that and said, we're going to keep on and keep recruiting you, because that Gibson means that much to this Georgia recruiting class. And when you have these high priority targets like a Gibson, like a KJ Bolden, to continue to have that consistency and be undeterred in going about how you're pitching someone coming to your university, I think that really resonates with these guys. There's no sour grapes with Kirby Smart. He knows well enough now you can't sort of have that way when, one, you can continue to recruit them up until they sign, and two, when these guys enter the transfer portal and might potentially be looking for new homes elsewhere, they're going to remember that they continued to be on them and continued to push them and recruit them and say, hey, we believe in you and you believe that this is a place that you can come play and be excellent at. And we've seen that work out in the past. Trevor Etienne comes to Georgia in part because of the recruiting benefits that he had when he was recruited by Georgia the first time around. So I think all of this to say, Kirby Smart understands how to recruit in this era. They've signed number one classes year in, year out. And while, yes, there are going to be some surprise commitments from time to time, over the long haul, Kirby Smart has shown the track record that he knows what he's doing in this regard and knows how to end up winning these big recruiting battles, even if it doesn't seem to be going all that well at first.
So let me ask you this, Chef Connor. With the addition of Isaiah Gibson, do you think that him and Justus Terry are almost a package deal and it's only a matter of time?
No, I think that there is still a long way to go in the Terry recruitment. Again, this was a guy that was committed to Georgia for over 14 months. And so I think that really slow played part of his recruitment. And now you see him obviously decommitting last week. Alabama's involved. I would not be surprised if Tennessee or Ohio State try and get involved in this recruitment moving forward. Obviously, Georgia would love this to be done sooner rather than later, but I don't believe Gibson and Terry are a package deal because, again, Gibson wasn't committed to Georgia when Terry was the first time around. So I think the fact that they committed that same visit weekend to USC, it just happened to be because they were both visiting that weekend. And I think Georgia is going to go the distance with Justus Terry. I wouldn't be surprised if this recruitment comes to an end in July, but the longer this goes, I think the tougher it becomes for Georgia, just because that gives other teams more time to catch up and try and land a player like Terry. But I don't think that these two are a package deal and tied at the hip.
There was one thing that you said I really liked, and it was the fact that the recruiting really starts when they commit somewhere else, and that was certainly maybe the hope in the case of C.J. Wiley and his commitment to the University of Florida State University. I will never get over that. That is the only way I'm going to acknowledge FSU for now. But that happened on June 25th. I was there in person along with Jeff Sentell. And let me just say, I have been a part of many awkward silences and moments in my lifetime, but never for that long. It was one of those things where I was trying to peek in the book bag. I saw the Georgia hat. I felt good about it. I mean, you had all the UGA media members there, and it seemed like it was going to go a certain way. And even when he said that he was committing somewhere else, I kid you not, like, I'm not being dramatic here. The pause and silence in the room had to have been at least 4 or 5 seconds, and he had to reiterate that that was where he really wanted to go. And I guess for me, still early in my career, it was a very eye-opening experience because this is the first time I've been to a ceremony like this where they didn't commit to Georgia, and so I kind of got that first feel for it. But I think the one thing that stood out the most is he told Jeff Sentell that he was committed to the University of Florida State University for now.
Yeah, watching it, you see how he has that full hoodie zip. I was expecting him to unzip that and show off a Georgia shirt. I did not think that he was going to pick up a hat, much less a Florida State one that looked like it had never been worn. This is a real surprise, and it's something that I think we see less and less of moving forward now. We talked about this on Tuesday with Brandon, where it seems like so many of his recruitments are preordained, or we know so much because recruiting is just covered so much harder now than it used to be. But C.J. Wiley is truly something out of left field. And then when he gives, I think, the comments that he gives afterwards, where, he's still open to being recruited. He's still leaving open the idea that he might take visits elsewhere. I think shows that, again, we talk about consistency. Georgia saw that, and once I think they get over the initial shock of him picking Florida State, they're like, all right, got our work cut out for us. We've got to continue to recruit him. There were a lot of people making the KJ Wiley references because KJ Bolden a year ago commits to Florida State at first, somewhat as a surprise there when he does so in August. And then even going into December, there was a lot of buzz around Auburn at that point in time, and he ultimately ends up picking Georgia at the end. I think there are a lot of Georgia fans out there hoping that Wiley follows a similar track. But this just goes to show you that even in this modern recruiting age where we think we know so much and we have it all figured out, there are still a lot of surprises out there. And in fact, I think because the recruiting is covered the way that it is these days, it makes moments like Wiley all the more stunning because we just don't see it as often as we used to.
Yeah, I wasn't the only DawgNation person that was there at the commitment ceremony, but Jeff Sentell also was too, and I think he made an interesting point that kind of ties what you just said versus what Kirby Smart also said in the KJ Bolden clip that we showed earlier, and ties both ideas together. Here's what Jeff had to say about C.J. Wiley last night on Before the Hedges.
He clarified his commitment. He said right now his choice was FSU, and then he would look to keep taking visits. He said his recruitment was still open, but that was just something that he felt led to do. You see CJ there, great athlete, I think what it does, considering what you're hearing now, the feelings now is C.J. Wiley committed to Florida State, of course. That thing could go very much like the K.J. Bolden situation there, where K.J. Bolden surprised some folks by committing to FSU. And then Georgia played the long game. Kirby Smart continued to recruit K.J. Bolden. And the thinking here is you just got to wonder, and you got to go, will Georgia and will Kirby Smart stay consistent, stay persistent with a guy like C.J. Wiley?
Yeah, it goes back. I mean, the KJ Bolden comparison is obviously there because the stories are so similar, but also in terms of playing the long game. And you and I both know there's a lot of time between now and signing day. I mean, he has a whole senior season left to play, so I wouldn't count him out just yet. I don't know if CJ Wiley will end up being a Dog, but something tells me he also might not end up at Florida State either.
Yeah, again, I think we see with recruiting this day and age, flips happen more often than not. Georgia's won their fair share. Georgia's also had guys flip away as well. And I think with Wiley in particular, with wide receiver being such an important focus in this recruiting cycle, they're going to stay on him. James Coley was brought in to land guys like C.J. Wiley, and I still feel good about what Georgia can potentially do there. But I will say it does make the Travis Smith decision all the more important. It makes the addition of Tyler J. Williams this past week all the more important there for Georgia. But I think Georgia, again, we talked earlier about the best version of Georgia's 2025 recruiting class. That has C.J. Wiley in it, in my opinion, and I think Kirby Smart agrees with that, and that's why they're going to continue to be consistent and persistent in how they go about recruiting C.J. Wiley.
Well, here's the thing. Even though UGA did not get four-star wide receiver C.J. Wiley the first time, the very next day on June 26th, Kirby Smart said, hold my beer. We're still the University of Georgia. We can have our pick of the litter, and boom, what do you know? They get, guess what? A four-star wide receiver in Tyler J. Williams, not to be confused with the former Georgia Bulldog Tyler Williams, who is now at Minnesota. This is Tyler J. Williams. And Jeff Santel threw out a great stat last night to really put things into perspective. Even though he only caught 26 passes last year, 15 of those 26 were touchdowns. More than 50% of the times that he caught the ball, it was a touchdown. So even though UJ doesn't get C.J. Wiley, I mean, it's the University of Georgia. Of course, the next day they're going to go out and get yet another four-star wide receiver.
Yeah, much like there always having to be a Stark and Winterfell, I guess there always has to be a Tyler Williams in the Georgia receiver room. And this is where I think James Coley's connections to Florida, specifically South Florida, pay off. They're able to go in and land Tyler Williams, a good big-bodied wide receiver, not quite as raw, I think, as the previous Tyler Williams was, and that's a big reason why he's now at Minnesota. But there's a lot to like here, and Georgia is building a really strong wide receiver class, and it has to be because of what they potentially stand to lose following this 2024 season. Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas, Colby Young, Michael Jackson III, Arian Smith are all seniors. Dylan Bell can enter the NFL draft after this year. That's 6 guys right there, and that's before even factoring in the transfer portal, where I think you just understand there are going to be some guys that end up moving on. So they need to go hard in the high school wide receiver recruiting class, and also more likely in the transfer portal as well. So going out and landing Williams, I think, is big moving forward for this Georgia room, just even from a depth standpoint. We'll see how he develops when he gets to the University of Georgia. Obviously a great athlete and someone that was a want in this class. But wide receiver is such an important position for Georgia in this recruiting cycle. And so landing a guy like Williams, I think, helps underscore that point.
So now that we've broken down the timeline, I want to end with this. It seemed like for a while that 2025 class was stagnant, but in the last week on the 24/7 team recruiting rankings, just in the last week, UGA has went from 11 to number 3. Connor, based on what you've seen in the last week or two, is UGA on the right path in terms of recruiting for the 2025 class?
Interesting. You're using 247 instead of, another one where a family member.
And why would that be interesting, Connor? Why is that fascinating to you? Please explain.
I just find that interesting to note. Yeah, I mean, clearly Georgia's on the right path here. I think they still have a chance to end up with the number 1 overall recruiting class in this cycle. And at this point, I think as we sit here today, they have 16 commitments. I think that the best version of Georgia's class can be the number 1 overall class, but that includes landing Justus Terry, C.J. Wiley, Travis Smith Jr., Elijah Griffin, David Sanders Jr., Juan Gaston. There are a lot of big fish, both literally and physically, still out there for Georgia to land and close on. But they've done a great job in this month of June of filling out this class and giving you a better idea of how things are going to look for this 2025 recruiting class. It's definitely going to finish top 5. The question is, are they able to land as many of those big name recruiting wins and push to get that number 1 overall class alongside the likes of Ohio State and Alabama?
So even though June is coming to an end, UGA's recruiting hot streak is not. So we will have more on that in the weeks to come. And we will come back and do an update on what July looks like for recruiting in the 2025 class. Now, we want to remind you guys that if you like what we do here, make sure to like and particularly subscribe to us on our DawgNation YouTube page. We've been reminding you guys, and you've been so helpful, but we just want to encourage everyone that's watching us to subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube page so you can keep up with Connor and I here at DawgNation at Large, DawgNation Daily, Before the Hedges, and On the Beat. Last week, we had a record number of likes on the show, which was awesome. And sorry, Connor, we had 2 dislikes, but I'm okay with that, knowing that we had a record number of likes. How does that make you feel?
I can assure you, whoever came up with the phrase, the customer is always right, was themselves, in fact, a customer. Again, like and subscribe our DawgNation YouTube page, ring the bell. We love bringing you guys content, and we hope to continue to do that here for the foreseeable future.
All right, now we are going to move on to something else. An update on college football. EA Sports came out with some rankings this week, starting with the toughest places to play. I think we have the list here that we can show. This is the top 10. I believe they released the top 20, but you see, of course, Kyle Field and Texas A&M at number 1, Alabama at 2, Tiger Stadium at 3, Ohio Stadium at 4, Sanford Stadium at 5. Then you've got Penn State, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Florida State, and then it wraps up the list with Florida. I think the biggest thing that jumps off the page here, Connor, is that 4 of the top 5 are all SEC stadiums. So not only is the SEC competitive in terms of competition, but it just goes to show that the atmospheres and the stadiums itself make it that much more difficult.
Look, I think there's been a lot of chatter this week around toughest places to play. Look, there are even plenty of skeptics out there about having Georgia as high as Georgia is in that ranking. Georgia, I believe they've won 25 straight games at home, have not lost at home since 2019. But how much of that do you factor into the Sanford Stadium environment? And how much of that do you factor into the fact that Georgia's been the best team in college football over the last 5 seasons? I do think that you can point to, say, that Georgia-Tennessee game in 2022 as a real stamp moment for the Georgia crowd there that day. They absolutely had an impact there. But I think part of the issue, too, Georgia hasn't had a whole lot of massive home games. Obviously, the Tennessee one really sticks out, but like LSU hasn't played at Georgia since 2013. Texas has never played at Georgia. Alabama was last in Athens in 2015. The last big marquee non-conference game in Athens was Notre Dame back in 2019. Georgia, unfortunately, hasn't had an opportunity to host a lot of those marquee, top 10 type matchup games, especially in recent years, with Auburn, I think, making the downturn that they have. And I think that's part of the reason why there are a lot of college football people out there skeptical of Georgia being as high as they are. I'll just say this. For a night game in late October, early November, where that place is reared up and ready to go. You even saw a few years ago against Arkansas on a noon kickoff. Georgia can show up and make a difference that day from a fan perspective. Obviously, Georgia having such a talented team helps boost them in terms of their home success. But I will say, over the last 5 years, the home atmosphere in Georgia has gotten a lot better than where it was, say, at the end of the Mark Richt era.
And if it's okay, I'd like to bring this list back up really quick. This is something that I don't feel like I have the best opinion on because I have not been to any of these stadiums other than Sanford. So, Connor, I'm going to have you speak on this. Which stadium is too high and which stadium is too low?
I think Beaver Stadium is too high, in my opinion. I get the whiteout is super cool. It's an awesome experience. Part of it, unfortunately, has been undercut by Fox and then putting the biggest games at noon. But if Beaver Stadium is such a tough place to play in, why is it that Penn State always goes out there and loses rather convincingly or forcefully to Michigan and to Ohio State? Those are the two best teams that you play in your schedule. And yes, Penn State is just less talented than those teams. but Penn State is not supposedly a pushover, and they just haven't been as competitive in my mind as to earn that number 6 billing there. I think the other team that, and again, I don't want to go too Big Ten heavy here, I don't understand how Michigan is outside the top 10 here. It is a massive stadium. I would include Neyland Stadium here as well. I think both of those programs deserve to be in the top 10 here. You go stand on the field down there at Neyland Stadium and you just look straight up. It's built like a Gothic cathedral in central Germany. And look, that place was really loud that first play of the Tennessee game last year where they score and they go up 7-0. It was a Dolly Parton concert there at the end of the first quarter. And I do think that game and that atmosphere, when Tennessee is right, like they were in 2022, can make a difference like you saw against Alabama. So for them, I think to come in ranked number 16, or Michigan was number 16 and Tennessee was outside the top 10, those are the two programs I think that have a bone to pick with that listing.
Yeah, two things about what you just said, and then we'll move on to offenses. The booth has just informed me that the Penn State is 2-7 versus top 15 programs in whiteout games, so that only goes to prove your point. And let me just say this about Neyland Stadium. This is what I gathered from my time there, even though it's not in the top 10. I have been here. It was kind of like the great American Scream Machine of stadiums to me. I kept looking around like, dang, if I just unscrew one nail here, this whole place is going to fall apart. And that in itself is intimidating to me because I was worried about my own safety. But the atmosphere was great. We were on the very top of the stadium, so that was cool. But I definitely think that I would have liked to have seen Tennessee in the top 10 as well. And with that, we will come to a close on the toughest stadiums to play in. And let's move on to offenses. The offenses were released this morning. And boom, the Dogs are at number 1, followed by Oregon, but they both have 94 overall rankings. Then you have Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Miami, Colorado, Missouri, and Clemson. First off, it's just crazy to even think that UGA is number 1 here. Not in the fact that it's not realistic, but just the fact that Georgia is in that spot because over the years, especially in recent years, it's always been about the Georgia defense and never about the Georgia offense. So I really love seeing that big old G there at number 1.
Right. There are two programs in the last 2 years to average over 40 points a game. One of them was USC, led obviously by Heisman Trophy winner and number 1 overall draft pick Caleb Williams. Georgia was the other one there. And this offense has a chance, I think, this year to be even better. Carson Beck in his second year as a starting quarterback for Georgia has a chance to continue to grow and get better. The offensive line is going to be as good as anyone in the country this year. They really leaned on the transfer portal to bring in guys like a Trevor Etienne, a Benjamin Urasek, a Colby Young at wide receiver. And you've shown that throughout changes, quarterback changes with Stetson Bennett moving on, Todd Monken moving on in the NFL, Kirby Smart has figured out this offensive thing, and they're able to put up points in bunches. Obviously, didn't do enough of that in the SEC championship game against Alabama, but you look at other big games last year, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Florida State in the Orange Bowl, TCU in the national championship game. Georgia has no problem putting up points in quickly, and I think you're going to see that a lot this season, and I think this ranking reflects that.
Here's the thing, though. Even though UJ comes in at number 1, they're tied with Oregon with that 94 overall ranking. Is it fair to say that UJ and Oregon are even on the same level in terms of that ranking?
It's very different in the way those two programs play offense. I think Oregon put up a lot of big points last year, in part because of just the schedule and the way that they play offense. I think that boosts some of the raw numbers in terms of statistical production. And that's why you see it that high there. But I think if you go position by position, I think you're taking more guys on Georgia than you are on Oregon. Look, there's a lot of nits that you can pick with this offensive list here. Colorado at 8 is stunning because how can you have an 89 overall offense when your offensive line is probably somewhere in the 70s at best? Clemson at 10 is really head-scratching. That was not a great offense a season ago. And yes, you bring back Cade Klubnik and Phil Maffa. You're leaning on 2 freshman wide receivers to really come and produce there. So a lot of question marks with the way that they did that list there. But Georgia comes in at number 1, and I do think that speaks to what they see in this Georgia offense and the talent that they have and what they can produce this year.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment of Colorado and Clemson because neither team were in the top 50 in scoring offenses for the NCAA last year. I feel like the one person that got snubbed here from the top 10 was Oklahoma, who finished top 3 in both scoring offense and total offense. And even though they lose Dylan Gabriel to Oregon, I feel like Oklahoma was the team that they missed out on here, especially if you're going to put Colorado and Clemson in the top 10, which were the first two things I looked at. And I was like, that doesn't sit right with me.
Okay, noted.
Okay, cool. Connor has nothing to say for the first time in like ever. So with that, we will come to a close on that. And let's move on to defenses, which was actually released right before we started filming this show. So let's go ahead and take a look at the top 10 defenses. All right, first off, Ohio State, who hasn't been able to defend Michigan for the last 3 years, but okay, that makes sense. You got Georgia at number 2, Oregon at number 3, Alabama at 4, Clemson at 5, Notre Dame at 6, Michigan at 7, Texas at 8, Penn State at 9, and Utah at 10. Connor, when you look at this list, what's the first thing you notice?
Ohio State, because they're number 1. Like, that's just how lists work.
Okay.
I'm not surprised that Ohio State comes in number 1.
Mm-hmm.
I think their defensive line on paper is a little bit better than Georgia's. They return more in the secondary there. And then you factor in the addition of Caleb Downs. You understand why that sets them over the top. Whereas if Georgia had been able to land Caleb Downs, maybe Georgia has the number 1 overall defense here. But, again, the fact that they're at 94 overall, I think speaks to the talent level on this defense and what they have. Michael Williams and Malachi Starks, if those guys aren't 95 overall players, I have some serious questions about who did the rankings for these games. And quite frankly, I already do have serious questions there. But they have 2 of the better defensive players in the entire country. This linebacker room is as deep as anyone out there. I think the defensive line is going to be better. And while, yes, Ohio State is ranked above Georgia right now, I wouldn't have a problem in the slightest if you're a Georgia fan saying, I think Georgia's defense is better than Ohio State's.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and look at that list again because there was something that I didn't notice the first time, but I think I noticed it the second time around. And it's, okay, so you've got Ohio State at 96. You've got Georgia at 94, but then you've got Oregon and Alabama, who it's a 90 overall. I feel like that 4-point difference says a lot about the separation between, you have Ohio State at 96, Georgia at 94. That 4-point separation between Georgia and Oregon, I think that says a lot considering that the rest of the teams, I mean, the only difference between them is either 0 or 2.
Yeah, and so I think, again, you see just these rankings both on the offensive side and the defensive side speak to where Georgia is as a program and the talent that they have on both sides of the ball and why this team has a chance, I think, to maybe be Kirby's most complete team in terms of what they do. The overall team rankings are going to come out tomorrow. I'd be shocked if Georgia wasn't number 1 overall, ironically with a 94 ranking there. And I think that's going to put them a good bit ahead of a program like Oregon, a program like Alabama, who are probably going to be 2 and 3 based on what we've seen with these rankings so far. And, for ranking completeness in terms of Kirby Smart teams, I'd probably have the 2022 team at number 1 in terms of what they had on defense and offense that season. And I think that Georgia's maybe a deeper team this year. And we'll find out if they have, say, the high-end talent that team had with Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Brock Bowers as a sophomore. But this team is so deep, and they can win in so many different ways, even in a transfer portal era. And so, again, this is just another metric I think that it's fair to use to show why Georgia is, no pun intended, although I think it is a little bit here, the top dog when it comes to college football, both the video game and the actual real-life sport played on the field.
Okay. Knowing what you know now, do you have an update on what team you might play with?
I do not. It certainly won't be any team in the top 10 here. Again, when I play this game with so many of the diehards that willed this game back, I think that you're not trying to play as the best team. Quite frankly, I'm trying to get through these first 4 years where I don't want to know. I want random names leading my dynasties to glory here. I want Ralph Freeman's and random guys that are made up from small towns you haven't even heard of. I don't want to play as a Malachi Starks or Michael Williams. I think those guys are great. I have no problem with fans that do. But for me, and the action that comes with the juice that is this game, I enjoy, going to a smaller school and building up through there. And the reality is you're just not going to see a Rutgers, a Cal, an SMU on some of these lists.
I just had a thought. I just had a flashback. Yes, I'm so excited. There was, I believe it was 2 weeks ago when we did the greatest postseasons, and I'm pretty sure it was you, Connor, who said that you didn't like an underdog. You wanted to see the best teams do what the best teams did. But then again, you don't want to play with a top 10 team in college football. Just seems a little bit hypocritical to me.
I mean, perhaps it is, but my hope is to eventually turn that underdog into a team like a Kennesaw State, where I dropped them in the SEC, and they're winning the SEC every single year.
Okay, whatever you say, Connor. Just know that I got you. I got you this one time. Okay, with that, we will maybe do an update next week on when the top teams are released for college football, but for now, we'll leave it at that. And remind you guys that we do have our DawgNation podcast feed, so you can listen to our podcast on the road wherever you go, whether that's Spotify or Apple. And we're going to ask you guys to leave a review on it. This one you can actually write out. So make sure to tell us how you like our podcast. And even if you can't watch us on video, you can still listen to us in podcast format on the DawgNation podcast feed. And now we're going to get to our fun segment. It's our first ever Mount Rushmore here on DawgNation at Large. You may be asking yourself, I saw Kaylee, I saw Cody, I saw Connor, but who was the fourth person on the Mount Rushmore? It's our good friend Eddie the Blind Squirrel, who will also be participating with us in today's Mount Rushmore, and I'm going to tell you what it is. So we do a little morning call every single day, and ideas are thrown around, and the emperor of DawgNation, our awesome boss, BJ Swinney, actually gave us this idea, and it was to do the Mount Rushmore of people with our names, so the famous Kayleys, Connors, Codys, and Eddies of the world, and that's what we're going to do today here on DawgNation at Large. So we're going to let Chef Connor go first. Who is the Mount Rushmore of Connors?
Yeah, so I've got 4 names here. A lot of different ways you can go. Connor is a name that is growing in popularity of late, but a lot of different spellings, and I've chosen to factor some of that in there. We've got Connor McDavid, the best hockey player in the world. If you don't think he should have won the Conn Smythe Award, get out of here. He had more assists in a single postseason than Wayne Gretzky did, breaking the Gretzky record. Incredible player, the best athlete named Connor out there. Connor Bedard, also first-round overall pick last year for the Chicago Blackhawks. Very competitive there. I don't know how you don't have Conor McGregor on here. He spells his name with one N, but he's a great fighter. Was in a recent Roadhouse movie, an incredible fighter. Long career, not quite the fighter that he used to be, but got to have the Irishman on there themselves, even if he does spell it with one N. That third one, you may not know unless you're a big pop culture head. That is Connor Roy from the hit TV show Secession, played fabulously by Alan Ruck, the oldest of Logan Roy's 4 children. And just an absolute lunatic in the best way. The con heads will love this, and we absolutely do. Just an incredible portrayal and really a sad character in the course of that show. And then we had to cater a little bit here to the 4th spot. There were a couple different names we could have gone with. I mentioned Connor Bedard earlier. Connor Palo, the actor famously known for playing Eric Vanderwoodson on Gossip Girl. Connor, again, it's not a super old name, but we're going to go with Connor Shaw here, former South Carolina quarterback. Led them to arguably their most successful stint as a program there when it was right under Steve Spurrier. Flowery Branch native. Had some trouble, I understand, with Chamblee High School in the Georgia high school football playoffs, but a very decorated career and a quarterback that SEC fans should know and remember well. So those are the 4 Connors on the Connor Mount Rushmore.
Oh, I love the Connor from Succession. That was a good one. Creativity points for you, Cody?
Yeah, that's Herd Chef, and yeah, you're correct. It was J-Bo Shaw and Connor Shaw that couldn't get past my Chamblee Bulldogs, just like Connor Shaw seemed to struggle with Georgia from time to time.
All right, my list is not going to be nearly as fun as Connor's. Not many famous Kayleys in the world. It's also hard. I think there's only there's 2 on here that have the same spelling as me, but we had to get really, really creative for my Mount Rushmore. This is the Kayleys version. So first, we are going to start with Kaylee Teller. She's Taylor Swift's BFF, and she's also married to Miles Teller, who is one of the co-owners of the Long Drink. So She is a famous Kaylee by association, and it's really hard to pull off a bold lip like that. Next one is going to be my Thursday night football on Amazon Prime queen. None other than Miss Kaylee Hartung. She spells her name the same way I do. She's she's got that brunette Kaylee to her. How can you not love that? And I mean, in case you didn't know, she has a really inspiring story. She actually lost her dad in a plane crash, and she's very open about how that's influenced her journalism career. So I'm going to go Kaylee Hartung for number 2. And then, of course, it's got to be Kaylee Cuoco, who's Penny from The Big Bang Theory. Somebody had to keep all those guys in check. I actually feel like that's probably what I do on a daily basis, so I resonate a lot with her. And the last one, you're probably like, who in the world is that? I had to go with my very own stepsister, whose name is also Kaylee. She is the funniest person I have ever met in my entire life, and I'm certainly proud to share a name with her. So we're going to go with my stepsister, Kaylee, for the 4th favorite Kaylee on this Mount Rushmore.
You put a Kaylee Mansell on your Kaylee Mansell Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, even though she's my stepsister, we do share a last name. She is also Kaylee Mansell.
But spelled a little different.
Yeah, hers is with a C. It's Cailey, and then mine is Kaylee.
I think you have the best looking Mount Rushmore. That is for sure. So it's time for my Mount Rushmore. The favorite Codys out there, and I got to get this kind of first out there. Cody Rhodes is probably the most popular Cody out there right now. Cody Rhodes was actually at Jim Donnan football camp with me back in 1998. And so he's so close in age. He's from Marietta. I just felt like it would be kind of strange to have him on my Mount Rushmore. So my Mount Rushmore does not include probably the most famous Cody, at least for right now. That is Cody Rhodes. But here is my Mount Rushmore. Starting on the left, back on Friday nights in the 90s, on Step by Step, you could always find Cody Lambert. That was his character's name. He was the first code man that was really out there to make it cool. He got our name out there, and I really appreciate him. So if you ever watch some old sitcoms from the 90s, Cody from Step by Step. Second Cody, well, that, of course, is Cody Maverick, the penguin from the movie Surf's Up. And Cody Maverick has my favorite quote. It is my life mantra. Cody's me, bro. Let me be me. And so for that reason, Cody Maverick is on the Cody of Mount Rushmore. The third one kind of looks like a guy who would be on Mount Rushmore. It, of course, is Buffalo Bill Cody. A little heavy on the killing of bison for me, but the man was a showman. He traveled the nation with a traveling circus and put on shows for people. And I, as a guy who wears a lot of costumes on this show, I appreciate a showman. The final one, an up-and-coming Cody, country music singer Cody Johnson. You've got songs like Till You Can't and The Painter out right now. So we'll give Cody Johnson a little shout out, a little country music love. So that is my Mount Rushmore of Codys.
Dang, that was a really strong list.
Only animated character on mine.
But you know what?
Yeah, that's the big win for me and my idea.
That one was good. But you look at our names, Kaylee, Cody, Connor, but who has a better name to share with than Eddie? So I guess we're all going to provide our insight on the Mount Rushmore of Eddies.
Yeah, we got to come up with 4. Connor, you get first and last pick. Go ahead, Connor. First pick.
Okay, first pick. One of the all-time great musicians, maybe arguably the greatest frontman of all time, Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam. Incredible name, incredible frontman for Pearl Jam. One of my favorite artists, both within his work at Pearl Jam, but obviously as a solo artist as well. Easy pick here. I'm sure that Kaylee's throwing a fit right now, but I got to take Eddie Vedder 1-1.
All right, so time for my pick. It is a classic every year in our house, watching Cousin Eddie roll up in his nasty Winnebago. Cousin Eddie from National Lampoon. Actually, all the movies he's really great in. He's probably best in the Christmas movie because he's kind of the hero, but even Vegas Vacation, Cousin Eddie is great. So Cousin Eddie from Vacation movies is my pick.
Well, since I can't have my first pick, let's go with Eddie Murphy. Coming to America, one of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, who doesn't love any Eddie Murphy movie? He was good. The 90s, he's good at acting now. So, Eddie, I imagine that's someone that you're probably pretty proud to share a name with is Eddie Murphy. Connor, bring it on.
And then for the last pick, so I have a question. Do we get to include Eds here, or does it have to be Eddie?
I think we got to go Eddie.
No Eds?
If you go Eds and Edwards, it opens it up too much.
Yeah.
It opens it up. Okay, then I'm going to go another fictional character here. I'm going to go Eddie Brock, better known as Venom from the Spider-Man comics. Tom Hardy plays him in the recent Venom movies. Kaylee just does not understand, went right over her head. Very quickly, we run out of Eddies if we're not using Eds and Edwards here. So I'm going to go with Eddie Brock.
Our Jeff Sintel just off the list, Eddie Van Halen.
Yes.
But we kind of did Eddie Vedder, so I felt like Eddie Van Halen was too close. He's just off the list.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, Connor, you did not go Eddie Redmayne, famous actor who had some great roles. I know you're a big film guy. I'm surprised Eddie Redmayne was held off the list.
I can't tell because he doesn't have eyes, but he looks like he's giving me the look of approval, like the nod of approval for his name. So I think that rounding this out, Eddie here probably had the strongest Mount Rushmore group.
We are a bunch of blind squirrels.
Yeah. Okay, and now we're going to end the show our personal favorite way by telling you guys what we learned today. Here's what I learned since it broke right before we filmed, and that is that the NCAA has now taken cannabis off the list of banned drugs for NCAA postseasons. It's like that guy said in the booth, TCU probably could have used that after the first half in the national championship against Georgia.
I have a question, and it's not so much what I learned, but it's what I'm hoping to learn here with this question.
Oh, God.
Who can you name the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore?
Oh, my gosh. Can I write them down first?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Hold on. All right, I know for sure Lincoln's one of them. Washington's one of them. It's one of the Roosevelts. I'm going to say it's Teddy. It's Teddy,
Correct.
right? Okay,
You're
so
3 out of 4.
3 out of 4. Am I tripping or is it both Roosevelts? Is it FDR and Teddy?
Is that your final answer?
That is my final answer.
You are incorrect. It is George Washington, Thomas Jefferson,
Dang it, that would
Teddy
have been
Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln.
That would have been my second choice. Would have been Jefferson for sure. That was the one, but for some reason I could imagine both of the Roosevelts on there.
Carver of Mount Rushmore, Gutzon Borglum, also started at least Stone Mountain.
Oh, that's cool.
Hometown.
Jefferson, dang it. It's always Jefferson that ruins my day. Okay, Connor, what did you learn?
I learned that you guys don't know who the 4 presidents are.
That is
on the
such
face
a
of Mount
cop-out.
Rushmore.
That is such a cop-out. What did you really learn? No.
That's tough.
Just because he doesn't remember, because he doesn't listen.
No, that we didn't talk about the NCAA removing cannabis testing on this show. That was something you learned.
I didn't say that I learned it on this show. I just said that I learned it today. Wordplay.
Okay, I learned a new season of The Bear came out.
Whatever. He just doesn't have anything else to say, so I'm not going to peer pressure him. DawgNation, thank you for joining us on this episode of DawgNation at Large. We appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll see you right back here on DawgNation at 7 o'clock. Connor, cop out.